Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, here to finally put this life of crime behind me as I review the 2016 action-adventure game Mafia III, developed by the newly formed studio Hangar 13 and released on October 7th, 2016. Hangar 13 was the result of a total restructuring of development studio 2K Czech after their main studio closed down, with all resources being relocated to California. Hangar 13 and Mafia 3's development were to be led by Ron Ferguson, who had previously served as the EVP of development on a little game called BioShock Infinite. You may have heard of it, but he departed shortly after due to creative differences and was replaced by Hayden Blackman, who Star Wars fans may recognize as the writer-director of both Force Unleashed games. Eventually, late 60s New Orleans, renamed New Bordeaux, was chosen as the setting, along with using that location to distance themselves from the Italian mob focus of the previous two installments. Does this game sit as the godfather of the series, or is it destined to sleep with the fishes? There's only one way to find out. Let's give it everything we've got! The game begins with a frankly unnecessary statement that basically says racism is and was bad, but I do applaud them for being dedicated to historical accuracy. Yeah, some of you should take notes. Okay, so the game actually begins with a film reel advertising the splendor of New Bordeaux being interspersed with documentary footage set after the game, recounting in very vague language how destructive our rampage is going to be. Going so far as to say he did more damage to the city than the War of 1812, the Civil War, and every single hurricane combined. Who the f are we, Kratos? No, we're Lincoln Clay, who we hear the whole life story of from Father James, who talks about his life as an orphan and joining the Black Mob run by Sammy Robinson, and CIA member John Donovan, who recounts his time with Lincoln in the Vietnam War. Returning from the war that the US definitely won, you guys, Lincoln meets up with Ellis Robinson, son of Sammy, and essentially Lincoln's adoptive brother. They drive back to Sammy's bar for a nice reunion party. The next day, Link learns that the Black Mob have become the targets of the Haitian gang, who fled from Haiti along with thousands of others as a result of President Francois Duvalier's intense undercover death squad. The Haitian gang has stolen so much money from Sammy that he hasn't been able to pay the Marcanos, the crime family that runs all of New Bordeaux, in 3 months. The three of them create a plan for Lincoln and Ellis to sneak into Bayou Phantom, the worst part of the map, and eliminate the gang's leader, a man named Baca. This stupid boss's stupid hideout in this stupid swamp is the first extended stealth prioritized section of the game, and unlike Tommy and Vito, Lincoln basically is Batman.
Where's the crime?
He can silently take out enemies from behind, he can sense their locations through walls, and even lure them into takedowns by whistling. Maybe these guys are more deserving of the name Baca. One thing Black Man Batman can do that basic bitch Bruce can't is pick up bodies and move them somewhere else so as not to alarm the remaining enemies. Lincoln confronts Baca and makes him pay for messing with his family, which magically frees this woman Cassandra, who we'll be seeing again later.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Somehow, snapping Baca's neck, pretty much the universal silent takedown in video games, attracts the attention of the Haitians, and now Lincoln's gotta fight his way through the enemies swamping him. Despite the overhauled stealth element, the gunfighting is not much different from previous installments. You hide behind cover and shoot the people shooting at you just long enough for you to want it to end quicker. It will get a bit more fleshed out later on, but we're still in the prologue. Meeting up with Ellis at the entrance, the two of them speed out of there and back to Sammy, who informs Lincoln that Sal Marcano, head of the Marcano crime family, wants to speak with him about a job that will help pay off Sammy's debt. Getting into the Marcano estate after the security guard thinks he's the help, historical accuracy, he reunites with his good friend, Sal's son Georgie Marcano, who brings him out back to meet Sal and a certain familiar face.
This is Vito Scaletta.
As Vito leaves, Sal explains that he was sent to New Bordeaux about 15 years ago by the Commission, which explains what Vito's out was at the end of Mafia II. But Vito is the past and Lincoln is, well, still the past, but a more recent past. Sal then explains that a shipment of old money to be burned is going to be transported to the local reserve soon, and they are going to steal that money to then break into the vault and steal the larger amount of money in there. Also, Sal wants Lincoln to take over for Sammy and run the Hollow, which Lincoln respectfully declines out of loyalty. Okay, I have a confession to make. As the people who have played this game know, I haven't been entirely truthful with you. This isn't how the game opens, it's actually a flashback that occurs in the middle of the heist for some reason.
Why the fuck you lying?
Why you always lying?
I just figured it would make more sense to start at the earliest point. The game actually begins with Link and Georgie loading up the truck and bringing the money to the Federal Reserve. Georgie says some people in there might be a little rowdy with the language, but I'm sure they'll be able to keep it professional.
The fuck's this shitheel doing here? Affirmative action. You know how it is.
Affirmative action is the anti-racism policy that makes your race the determining factor as to whether or not you get a job or accepted into college, because all anti-racist things judge you by your race.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
The guard makes Lincoln carry the money bags, and then he drops the hard R in case you forgot what time period we're in. Back when people's biggest fear was their kids growing up in a racial jungle. They take out the guard when they get into the incinerator, and sadly you can't throw him in there. After silently assassinating the rest of the guards, they begin their plunder of the vault. However, one of the cages is on a different security system and sets off the alarm before their friend Danny has finished drilling them an escape route through the floor. Georgie and Lincoln have to fend off the cops while they wait, and this is when they decide to flash back to the stuff I talked about. Now do you see why I covered that first? Anyway, the cops pull out all the stops in this siege, first flooding the room with smoke and then cutting out the lights. And Danny's work with the drill isn't getting results as fast as they'd like, so he suggests blowing the hole wide open with TNT. Danny, don't you know how dangerous TNT is? Danny doesn't listen and makes a blast so big the whole vault falls into the sewer, pinning Danny's leg under the rubble. A quick documentary cut in, get used to those if you play this game, explains that Danny is the son of Thomas Burke, who used to run Point Verdun in New Bordeaux until he was betrayed by Sal Marcano. Danny was assigned to this mission in an attempt to get back in the good graces of Sal. The four men race through the sewers in a boat, which has to be both very fun and very disgusting. They manage to escape to the surface and slide into the perfect cover of Mardi Gras, with Danny slung over Lincoln's shoulder and told to act drunk so he doesn't have to walk on his injured leg. How you holding up, Danny?
Talking about your boobies.
I expect nothing less. Now, I've never been to New Orleans, but I imagine it's just this all the time. A quick call with Sammy helps set up a getaway car in a grocery store loading dock, and a large swarm of cops show up, so Lincoln decides to distract them while the rest head to the car. This is the introduction of police zones. Enter those areas and the cops will take that personally.
Spook.
Lincoln meets them at the car and they escape from the cops once again and return to Sammy's bar to revel in their newfound fortunes. Sal and Georgie show up to make sure the party goes out with a bang.
You shouldn't have said no.
Lincoln somehow survived being shot in the head at point-blank range and watches as Sal has Sammy, Ellis, and Danny killed, stealing all of the money and burning the bar down. Lincoln only surviving the fire thanks to the fortuitous arrival of Father James, who nurses him back to health. This event is the catalyst for the rest of the game, as Lincoln has Father James called John Donovan, the two of them working on a plan to dismantle Sal's entire empire and make him watch as Lincoln takes everything from him.
And then when you truly understood the depth of your failure, then you have my permission to die.
After returning to Sammy's bar to retrieve his stuff and unfortunately lose his sick coma beard, he heads to John's apartment to discuss their plan. Regardless of John's information, Lincoln's top priority is retaking control over Delray Hollow, now controlled by the Dixie Mafia, aka the comically over-exaggerated southern racist gang. John says the Haitians aren't too happy about this either, so his best bet is to make good with their unknown new leader and put them in charge after driving out the Dixies. Lincoln's plan is just to wait by a Haitian hideout until some boys come around and then interrogate one of them. This is the introduction to informants, which work similar to Riddler informants in the Arkham games, but thankfully you don't have to take out everyone else before you can interrogate them. After he goes to the voodoo shop he was told about, he just waits again. Now let's see who's in charge of the Haitians.
Hey, got him.
In case you didn't recognize her, this is the woman from the night Lincoln killed Baca. She was actually the leader of the Haitian gang the whole time. Baca just acted as a public front for security. After some negotiating, they agree to work together to take down Richie Doucette, leader of the Dixie Mafia operating out of the Hollow, and proponent of hunting black people for sport. This is the introduction to what becomes the core gameplay loop. Each section of the map will have different rackets that Link will either destroy or take over in order to get to the boss of that area. In this instance, he begins with with the prostitution ring being run out of a church named after Sammy's wife by a guy named Merle Trigger Jackson. Lincoln sneaks into the brothel, killing as many guys and stealing as much money as he wants to free the captured women, then heads off to kill one of Merle's high-ranking pimps. While he sneaks around, there are two things I would like to mention. One, the monetary total under the mission shows how much damage you have to do before you can confront that racket's boss, which you accumulate through doing different missions like clearing out their buildings, killing priority members, destroying property, among other things, and during stealth sections, some enemies will have sentry above them. This means that they will run away to summon more enemies if they spot you. Upon doing enough to trigger the trigger, Lincoln will once again invade the church to confront and kill him, handing over the racket to Cassandra and increasing her revenue. I'll have more to say about this later, but for now we move on. Lincoln's next target is Charlie Kincaid, leader of Delray Hollow's heroin racket. John says Lincoln may even be able to recruit Charlie, and he can also wiretap the city to be more tuned into the goings-on within the racket. This is the worst mechanic in the game. In order to recruit a racket boss and increase the money the racket makes, you have to wiretap every single junction box in the area, and to do so you have to go around picking up scraps to use. A lot of this game is very repetitive, and to me, this is the worst offender. Back on the subject of recruitment, Lincoln can also target racket informants, who will give him more information on the racket. Fail to stop them from getting into a car to escape, and you'll get to intimidate them into giving you the information by driving like a madman, which is always fun. Also, you can either recruit them to add to the total amount of money the racket will make, or kill them to earn that amount one time immediately. After doing enough damage, Lincoln is given the opportunity to recruit or kill the racket boss. I always recruited them because money. But you can do either one. And with Charlie out of the way one way or another, nothing remains between Lincoln and Richie Doucette, and thanks to a little interrogation work, Lincoln finds out that he's hanging around in an abandoned amusement park called Barren Saturdays. If you like extended gunfights through large open areas where not a lot else happens, then you'll love this game because this is the first of many. The abandoned amusement park aesthetic adds at least a little flavor to it, but it's no Left 4 Dead 2. Make your way to Richie, and Lincoln will ensure he stays hanging around the park for a long time to come.
Do you honestly think you're fucking funny?
A dead Doucette doesn't mean Link is any less dead set on his mission, returning to Cassandra to tell her the news and officially putting her in charge of the district. She tells Link how he can help build up trust amongst her gang, opening the first of what will be many optional side missions to boost the district's revenue. Regardless of whether you do it or not, the next step is to return to Donovan and get the rundown on the two other important figures to recruit, Thomas Burke up in Point Verdun and Vito Scaletta in River Row. You can choose who to go to first, and since I like name value, let's pay a visit to our old pal Vito. Donovan explains that Sal has never liked Vito and refused to give him his cut after the bank job. Since then, he's been restricting Vito's business in an effort to get permission from the commission to kill Vito, which he'll only get if Vito can't pay up on time. A quick and painful for some visit to Vito's place to free him from his captives reveals that Sal sent his nephew, Michael Greco, into River Row to take power away from Vito. Lincoln and Vito then agree to be partners as long as Link brings Greco to Vito. In order to do so, Lincoln has to dismantle and overtake the labor union extortion and contraband smuggling rackets. Like before, you do a series of very similar missions to do enough damage to draw out the racket boss, the bosses of this area being Andy Toretto and Roy Thibodeau. With both of them recruited or killed and the rackets handed over to Vito, Lincoln and Vito can now confront Michael Greco in his warehouse. Things get a bit more complicated, which you all should have seen coming, when Sal sends his own men to kill his nephew for failing to stop Lincoln, leading to a high-speed chase while the men try to slow Greco's roll. Interrogating Michael back at Vito's place gets him to reveal that Sal is secretly constructing a casino in an effort to turn New Bordeaux into Las Vegas, which includes paying a lot of money to get gambling laws changed, and he wants Vito dead out of fear he would leak that information to the commission. With River Row being river ran by a new river man, it's now that Sal and Georgie learn that Lincoln Clay is still alive, just in time for him to begin recruiting Thomas Burke, father of Danny Burke, who died in the shootout at Sammy's bar. I know I'm making it seem like this game moves quick, but 90% of your time is dedicated to the repetitive gameplay loop of weakening the rackets, which there is no need to detail. They're all the same.
Please stop.
stop this madness.
As informed by Donovan and the flashback from earlier, Point Verdun has been taken over by Roman the Butcher Barbieri after Sal betrayed Thomas and Danny had only been a part of the bank job as a part of Thomas's efforts to get back in Sal's good graces. After a little bit of convincing, Thomas details Roman's moonshine and protection rings, the latter of which being where you'll find the other members of the bloodline.
Uzi?
This is also where Thomas decides to showcase that the Burks are the best characters in this game.
Panther's piss. White mule. Allergen. Potchain. Moonshine. You ignorant fuck. Christ, what kind of booze you people drink over there in Darkyville?
Kind is not called painter's piss.
Boy, you ain't lived.
A position enforced by Thomas's daughter Nikki, who looks like the Irish translation of Sarah and helps Lincoln take down the moonshine ring by telling him about the leader, Carl Bevers, as well as where to find a man named Bear who tells him about Sonny Blue, leader of the protection ring, not the average person's preferred kind of sky. You know the deal, kill enforcers, destroy supplies, and all that jazz until you draw out the racket boss to either kill or recruit them. Get it? Jazz? Because we're With Burke taking the rackets back, it's time to set up a confrontation with Roman, and what better way to do so than just calling him up and simply asking. Thomas says Roman and his henchmen are on their way to the scrapyard, and the two of them, along with Nikki, are going to ambush them with snipers and explosive barrels that are, of course, red. I suck at sniping, and the destructible cover certainly doesn't help, but this isn't too hard. It's fun, and you can always drop down to use your other guns if you run out of sniper ammo, which you most definitely will.
If you suck!
With Roman De Niro down now, we find out through the documentary that Thomas broke Roman's legs so many times that there were barely any bones left to speak of, then put his body in a car and drove it into the Mississippi River, where it would remain for the next 20 years. Nice. With 3 upstanding business people now in Lincoln's employ, he calls all of them together for a meeting at an old plantation house in the bayou where the actual good part of the game starts. Though it's not much different. No one in there trusts anyone else in there, but they all agreed to work with Lincoln so they have a shared enemy in Sal Marcano. So Lincoln lays out the plan to first take out the Marcano family lieutenants, then the Capos, and finally an isolated Sal. Along the way, Link will decide who controls what parts of the city he takes over. Just like before, you can choose to do these in any order. So let's start with Enzo Conti and Barclay Mills. Enzo's an old school mobster in control of the garbage and guns rings, and they figure that he wouldn't fall in with Marcano unless he had a legit business partner, and Enzo's the best lead on discovering who that partner is. Once again, you do the things, or take a break to race for whatever reason, and reach Pete Santini, who controls the guns, and Paul Simons, who ensures every day is garbage day! And then you're off to confront Enzo Conti, a combination of 2 of the most annoying people in wrestling, at the quarry in hopes of making a deal. Enzo stops Lincoln's attempt to pop his peanut butter pop, and as it happens, Enzo was good friends with Sammy and is happy to help Lincoln after learning his identity. He says Sal's legitimate business partner is one Remy Duval, who owns the land the casino is being built on and the construction company building it. He is located in Frisco Field, being closely monitored by Capo Olivia Marcano. Sal's hitmen arrive shortly after, and Lincoln and Enzo work together to hit them with an Uno reverse guard and make it out alive, rigging the place to blow as they go like they were trying to kill a Wendigo. With Conti no longer continuing his operations, it's time to assign the district to one of Lincoln's 3 partners. This is where things get interesting. Like before, each racket you take down gets taken over by someone, but now you get to choose who that someone is, and you get special bonuses depending on how much money one of the bosses is making. However, when you take down the big boss of an area, you get to decide who controls the whole district. Doing this plays a key part in how the story unfolds, as your relationships with the 3 are strained as is, and they will betray you if they feel neglected. Luckily, there's an even amount of district to divvy up, so you should spread the wealth evenly if you want the best ending. However, it does mean that you won't get the best benefits that any of the bosses have to offer. Back with Donovan, he gives the rundown on Remy Duval and Olivia Marcano. Remy runs the Southern Union in his spare time, basically a sister organization to the KKK, and Olivia was married to Sal's brother Lucio, having taken over all his rackets after his death. But we're going to leave them be for now, we've got more lieutenants to take care of. And now we're off to downtown with its construction and blackmail rackets all operating under the highly intelligent Tony D'Angelo Durazio. Along with that, Durazio is Sal's accountant and manages most of Uncle Lou Marcano's relationships. However, he only left his penthouse penthouse apartment once in the past month. So you know the routine. Lincoln has to dismantle his rackets to lure him out.
Oh, I can't fucking take anymore. And then I look at my watch and we've been playing for 1 minute and 30 seconds.
With the black male taking over Frankie Bernard's blackmail and deconstructing Jimmy Kavar's construction, it's time to once again infiltrate a ritzy hotel. Lincoln can either go straight through the front door, guns blazing, or steal a car to infiltrate the garage and postpone the blazing guns by about a minute, while the very Mark Strong-looking Tony prepares for Lincoln's arrival while on the phone with Blue. Lincoln confronts Tony, who says that he will be replaced tomorrow and no one will notice, which Lincoln takes personally. This obviously draws a lot of attention, so Lincoln has to fight his way out of the hotel and escape from the cops before he can bring Tony's ledger to Donovan. The two working out that the mysterious large payments to something only listed as US 5 CJ are bribes to a US judge on the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals as part of Sal's effort to legalize gambling. The plan is, of course, to destroy the rackets the anonymous judge frequents to scare him into unknowingly revealing himself. And the two rackets in Lou Marcano's French ward are Doc Gaston's drug rackets and Handsome Harry Robichaux's sex racket. Of course, a man who looks like this deals in sex and drugs. Embrace your inner Mr. Mackey and teach people that sex and drugs are bad, okay? And the two men learn the judge's identity is Cornelius Holden. But we'll be holding off on him for a little bit. The final lieutenant is Franco Pagani, who runs auto theft and smuggling rackets out of Tickfaw Harbor and reports directly to Capo Tommy Marcano. He's also been using his ship to make clandestine trips to Havana, not because half of his heart is there or whatever, but because that's where the remains of Sal's old casinos are. He's been salvaging whatever he can for Sal's new casino. Tell Junior Holland's GTA ring to GTFO, and Pop's Holland's smuggling ring, and Franco will have no choice but to pull into port early. Donovan's plan is to put a tracker on Frank's car once he arrives so they can track the elusive man's movements throughout the city, but that involves sneaking onto and through Frank's boat, the Tanager. If your game has a section on a boat, odds are I'm going to enjoy it. Unless your game is Man of Badan, but that's a story for another time. This one is no exception, even though you aren't on the Tanager for very long. Luckily, it won't be our last boating excursion before the credits roll. With the tracker in place, Lincoln will be led to the best oil gas station, but Frank gets away. So Link has to chase him down and destroy his precious car along with most of his internal organs before he can interrogate him. Frank reveals that he was instructed to bring a man named Alvarez from Cuba, a counterfeiter who worked for Fidel Castro. Along with the fact that Sal never wanted the money from the opening job on the Federal Reserve, he wanted the printing plates. However, he dies from his injuries before he can tell Lincoln where to find Alvarez. After recovering from a brief fit of anger, Lincoln gets the rundown on South Downs, the district controlled by Tommy Marcano, who is housing Alvarez and the money plates. You'll never guess, but Tommy runs two rackets out of the place, gambling and black market. And getting those to fold is the best chance at flushing Tommy and Alvarez out.
It's beginning to look a lot like fuck this.
Inform the gambling man Johnny Peralta that it's time to run, and tell Artie Higgins' black market that it's actually Market of Color now, and Alvarez will be startled. He'll call his uncle to pick him up, who rats his location to Sal, so Lincoln has to get to Alvarez and retrieve the place before Sal's men can. Lincoln saves Alvarez from the first round of executioners and informs him that he has no way out of the city unless he trusts Lincoln. He eventually agrees to go with him, revealing that the counterfeiting operation has already been activated under a boxing gym run by Tommy. Alvarez is rewarded for this by being brought to Father James, who reluctantly agrees to help get him out of the city. Their plan is for Lincoln to enter Tommy's jungle fights through a recruiter named Alcy, who has stolen money from Sammy for years and sold black men to Tommy for his fights. Lincoln gets him to help by saying it will wipe his slate clean. Upon entering the Acadia as Jackknife Johnson, Lincoln has to go through a gauntlet match of opponents in a pretty fun combat section where you can work face or heel depending on your interactions with the crowd. Link becomes the new champion and goes to collect the winnings, but he's stopped by Tommy, who knocks him out and plans to light him up like it was the 5th of November. But Lincoln doesn't give two fucks about this guy's monologue, taking the time to fray the rope and unleash his inner Batman before confronting a wounded Tommy. He steals the printing plates and plans to fulfill Tommy's wish in burning the place down, which isn't the wisest move since Lincoln was doused in extra thick gasoline about 30 seconds ago, but fire makes action set pieces cooler. Ironically. Escape the gym and the first capo is down, leading to a cutscene between Sal and Georgie where the lack of planned counterfeit funds bring up the name of an old friend.
Could always call Leo Galante, ask him to front.
Fuck him!
And now it's time to circle back to the two dons we passed along the way. starting with Olivia Marcano. Lincoln meets up with Special Agent Jackie Grimaldi to learn that the IRS is investigating a man named Chester Moreau, financer of the Southern Union, because they're making way more money than usual for a business in that area.
I'm crazy enough to take on Batman, but the IRS? No, thank you.
Do enough damage and Lincoln will learn that the Southern Union's boosted income is coming from slave auctions. Understandably, Moreau is the one racket boss you cannot recruit. The other racket in this area is the PCP production headed by chemist Bobby Bastion. Pop a cap in production and the inevitable will happen once more, with Lincoln shooting his way to Bobby and either recruiting or killing him. Mr. Duval isn't too happy that a black man is threatening his way of life, his words not mine, so he's ordered the Southern Union to find Lincoln and kill him, putting Remy Duval firmly at the top of Lincoln's to kill list. He learns that Remy is organizing a gathering atop Lookout Point, and it's there that he scratches Remy's name off his list and prevents him from hearing any more Jim crowing about the Southern Union. With no more distractions between Lincoln and Olivia, it's time to end the relationship between Liv and the living. And the plan is actually very simple. Go to Remy's wake, drop Lincoln off in a suit, have everyone there assume he's part of the help, drug the security with LSD drinks, then kill Olivia. Before he does that final step, however, he pries from her the location of one Stephen DeGarmo, nephew of Remy Duval and inheritor of the land the casino is to be built on. Lincoln leaves Liv to die and fights his way through the gardens to rescue Stephen, who is being forced to sign over the land to Marcano. Lincoln saves DeGarmo by bringing him to Donovan, further complicating the casino construction. Also, with Olivia upsetting Sal one too many times, he sends Georgie to kill her in her hospital bed. It's also at this point, with two capos dead, that Sal brings in Nino Santangelo, a Cuban heroin kingpin who has been supplying Georgie with heroin to sneak into New Bordeaux. Sal is desperate for money, so he agrees to let Santangelo sell heroin in the city in exchange for his funds.
Look, see the money. You like the money.
The arrival of Santangelo is only to set up the immediate next mission where he leads a hit squad on Lincoln that you have to take out, ending with you putting down yet another violent racist. Glad they brought him in for 5 minutes. And now it's finally time to take Judge Cornelius off hold and finally take care of him. Since it's not enough for him to just be a corrupt judge, he's also a racist judge, looking to acquit someone who murdered 2 young black men. You can choose to eliminate him in a couple different ways, the quickest being to just blow up his car and zoom the fuck out of there and away from the cops. With the judge facing his judgment day, it's finally time to pay a visit to our dear Uncle Lou Marcano. See, Sal is a smart man, and Lou is a man with connections, so they quickly establish a backup plan to get State Senator Walter Jacobs in their pocket by throwing him a fundraiser on Lou's riverboat. Lincoln blows up the coal dumper in the riverboat's path, stopping the boat and allowing him to board Lou's Belle, the Delphine. You already know why this is one of the most fun sections. This gunfight is actually pretty tough if you aren't prepared, as there are a lot of enemies in some pretty tight areas and it can eat through your ammo supplies quickly. One way or another though, Lincoln confronts Lou, who is ready to sacrifice his bud to escape. However, some burning debris shakes things up and Walter gets fucking burnt alive while Lincoln and Lou are thrown from the boat. Link stalks down Lou in the swamp and tells him to share a message with his brother. The kind of message he doesn't have to worry about being shot over. If you've been a good boss and delegated properly, your 3 associates will congratulate you on a job well done ahead of the final showdown. With nothing and barely anyone left, Sal and Georgie lock themselves down in the casino and order everyone left to guard it. And since we're a video game character, our odds 200 to 1 are the same as our odds 1 to 1. This final gunfight isn't as long as the ones from the previous 2 installments, contrary to everything else in this game, but it is still pretty tough thanks to there being a lot of guys that attack from a lot of angles and Georgie acting as a sniper with a wide window of range to cover in the final room. Speaking of which, it's about time Link finally comes face to face with the man who shot his face. And with that, Lincoln ascends to finally confront Sal Marcano, and they actually treat the Don with respect, having him invite Lincoln to sit down and talk about the lives they've lived. Well, respect may be a stretch. Now, Lincoln's journey is finally complete and he can walk out of the casino at ease.
I take it you're Lincoln Clay.
Leo Galante is somehow still alive, and he is here on behalf of the Commission to determine if Lincoln is a threat to them or not. He says he has no problem with them and doesn't mind sharing 20% of his profits with them as Sal did. One last meeting with Donovan and Father James sets up this game's multiple endings, as Donovan wants Lincoln to stay in control of New Bordeaux, while James wants him to leave the whole city. If you decide to leave, Lincoln will spend the rest of his life traveling the world and hiding from authorities. If you decide to stay, Link will be able to choose if he wants to rule the city alone or keep his associates. Rule alone and you kill them all, only to step outside and get Trudy monked by Father James. Choose to rule together, and the documentary crew will talk about how they expanded their empire throughout the entirety of the southern US, being legitimate enough to prevent the cops from being able to make any charges stick. There's also a random post-credit scene where Donovan reveals that one of the men interrogating him about his involvement in Lincoln Clay's takeover was involved in the murder of John F. Kennedy, which was orchestrated by the Marcano family.
Why?
But anyway, that, once and for all, is how Mafia works. Well, this was hard to write. Well, the first two Mafia games were tightly controlled narratives that felt more like interactive movies than open-world video games. Mafia 3 is almost a complete 180 in that regard. There's about 4 times as much gameplay as there is story, with the majority of your time being dedicated to the repetitive handful of missions to cripple and take over the many different rackets around the city. That being said, I do always enjoy doing a series of missions to set up a heist or something similar that can handle some repetitive missions. But when 75% of your game is repetitive missions, it begins to feel more like cutting corners than anything else. While I do appreciate trying something drastically different after Mafia 2 was basically Mafia 1, slightly different coat of paint, there was barely any of the mobster fun that made those two games enjoyable, as Lincoln Clay feels more like a grounded Batman wannabe and makes this game feel more like Army 1 than the opening of Mafia 2. Speaking of which, seeing Vito return and not forcing us to kill him was cool, and I appreciated the efforts to tie this game into the world, with my personal favorite moment being the optional side mission where Vito tasks Lincoln with helping him find out what happened to Joe at the end of the second game. Overall, Mafia 3 is a game best played while listening to music or watching a live stream, something to distract from how repetitive and grindy the game can feel at times. Aside from that, there are plenty of fun moments that provide a serviceable game that could easily be someone's favorite in the series depending on what they like. 6 out of 10. Our run-ins with the Mafia may be over, but I don't think I want to leave the 1960s yet. Seeing all the crime and violence and racism and commie pinkos that have infected society make me think someone should create a whole new society that doesn't allow any of that. I'm gonna go try and find if one exists, and while I do, I just have one request. Would you kindly watch the next video?
Continue.